exactly.
That's really the artistry that comes into play when you begin to assemble all of your thoughts to make them clear, whether it's choreography or whether it's drill and staging and form, or whether it's flag work or flag design or costume design. All of those things have to work together as opposed to just doing them to do them. And I've talked to you in the past about drill moves, like a block rotation. Like, when is a block rotation important in a moment for a show, whether it's conceptually or musically? I mean, it has to exist within that program in a very specific way, like couture clothing that's been designed specifically for you and no one else, and it couldn't be in another show. If there's a mellophone run, is that mellophone run going to go, could that be in any show? Or a drill? Like, well, that drill could go to any music, you know, if you just change the counts. No, everything has to work together. And that's why I say when you assemble those things, it goes beyond just assembling them, but you're creating a real sense of poetry and theatrical narrative, you know, to a program. And that's important because it keeps you consistent all the way through, keeps you on track with your concept, because we're all saying to people, here's what our show is, and then we have to be consistently explaining that all the way throughout.
Right, but that seems tricky to me when you are explaining it on more than one level, because I think it's so cool that you guys start on the starting line and you come across, and all that rifle work. It's so interesting to me, you know. And it's like I literally was having these flashbacks, like this reminds me, you know, like, which is you really accomplished. But at the same time, there are these cocoon things going on, right? So you're bringing in both layers at the same time, and I'm like, that is so, like, as a designer, that's so hard to. Like, you're weaving all of these stories at the same time. That's so tricky.
Yeah.
You know, so again, am I overanalyzing it, you know?
No, not at all. And that's the fun part of it, because that's why you want to see a show that has depth and many layers and levels. That's why you want to see it over and over again. Whether it's drum corps at DCI or winter guards at WGI or the incredible bands at BOA, I want to see them a million times, because I want to get inside, I want to understand, and I get the feeling changes each time. You know, I experience it differently. But I'm so glad you got the cocoons, because people do ask about, what are the girls in white bags over there? Well, they were white for a reason, and they were cocoons, and they were living. The stairs were very important because all of the process of metamorphosis, whether it was the Blue Devils or a drum corps, is a progression upward. That's our aspiration. We always want to go upward. That's why we just didn't create cocoons around the field. You know what I mean? There had to be something that says we're in the process of ascension. That's why that prop was very specific for the show, because of course we could have used stairs a lot of different times in different shows, but they wouldn't have been right. This was right for this show. And they had to have a sort of place of arrival, a platform at the top from which you could look out over the vast sort of universe that we have going on. And sometimes there's musical soloists who live up there, or there's dancers, and they're sort of, you know, purveying the atmosphere that we've created, and they're floating above this whole thing. It's the aspiration. But yeah, you got the company front. That's very clear. And there's a marching glockenspiel that Evelyn carries at the beginning, which is really just a nod. Yeah, that's a nod to the beginnings of the corps, but one important thing that I spoke with Dave Glide, who is our musical arranger and musical coordinator, about early on, was that we are incapable of looking backwards. It's not going to happen. Our heads don't go that way. You know, even when we're backing up that big company front, we can't turn our heads around. We can't look to what was behind us. But we can reflect upon it and experience it from where we are looking. Like I'm looking here right now, I can't see the past, but I can reflect on it. So it was important that we not try to recreate the past, but we reflect on it, and that we acknowledge the fact that like when I was dropped into an introduction to drum corps, my band director in high school would show us videos. And this would be 75, maybe 1974, 1975, of drum corps. You know, he never showed us, he always showed us the groups who were being the most innovative. And I thought that was so interesting when I thought about it. The groups who were doing something very, very different, I mean, he would point out excellence and what that achievement was about, but quite often he would drop us into what were the most innovative shows, you know. Whether it was a Civil War battle, I think a corps, we watched a video of that. You probably might even know who this was, but I know the Bridgemen later on went on to explore, you know, the Civil War and divided the corps into two parts, blah, blah, blah. But you got it. I mean, that was really innovative for the time. And so along with that, we had to find ways to reflect on the past, but know that we are looking to the future, because that's, even people, when I was marching, we were always thinking ahead. We were always we weren't just reveling in everything that we were doing, like our heavy rifles and, you know, our really tall flags and heavy flag. You know, we were reveling in the activity and what we were doing, but we were always thinking of, where can this go? That's always been there. I've learned that whenever I've seen or talked to people that experienced drum corps from the first days. There was always an idea of looking forward. So even the sampling that you hear from the pit in the beginning of the show when they're marching the company front, that's counting. It's just in a foreign language. Because my idea was always that drum corps was going to become not just an American thing. It was going to become a global thing if it wasn't already. So there was always that sort of universality to it. So finding that sample that could count and count in a foreign language was important, and that's what the sample is at the beginning. Plus, we have Jerry Seawright now in the show. We've sampled his voice from one of the very, if not the very first performance that they did. So he's in the show now, because you can reflect on all parts of your past, not just one aspect of it, you know, but you're reflecting on it.
So you keep saying the word reflecting, and I don't want to be too literal, but there are reflective panels on those stairs. Is that any literal representation of that?
Absolutely, yeah. And not only our past from the year when we used mirrors, but the reflective quality that happens. And a sort of what these props do, and it has a liquid quality about it, which puts it into motion, which I found quite poetic, that there's a real sense of motion and that things are mobile and can move. I liked that even in the reflective quality of the panels. Okay, am I talking too much?
I'm just loving I'm loving every second of this. Okay, so so I have some questions. I'm going to maybe jump in here from time.
So this was just an excerpt of my hour-long conversation with Scott. He was so generous to give us his time and talk about his concepts of design and putting the show together. Really interesting stuff. You can hear the entire conversation over an hour at marchingartseducation.com. There's no charge to access this video there. You watch the entire thing. Believe me, you don't want to miss it. So go to marchingartseducation.com. Watch the entire conversation with Scott Chandler. Thanks.